Here are your AARP top tips on shortcuts to happiness. Research has found that people over 50 often get happier as they age. Along with proper sleep and diet, here are some more ways to boost your bliss, according to the experts. See the morning light. Sunlight boosts serotonin, a chemical your body produces to regulate mood and improve your ability to focus. Try taking a morning walk to absorb some sun. That early dose of daylight also helps you get better sleep at night. Get in micro-exercise. If you can't do a regular workout each day, at least take a short walk, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Or you can lift hand weights or do balance exercises. Even a small amount of exercise can help reduce stress. Tidy up. A little decluttering each day can also lighten your mood and ease your mind. Getting organized could lead to better sleep, improved relationships, and even weight loss. Reach out. See friends or visit family. Reconnect with old pals. If a good friend is far away, set an annual time and place to meet, or join a group and make new friends. Meditate. Just 5 minutes a day of quiet reflection can do wonders to relieve anxiety, neutralize negative thinking, and clear your mind. If you don't know how to get started, there's plenty of guidance available in books, classes, and apps. For more tips to stay healthy, visit aarp.org/health.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today's virtual event. As a dedicated volunteer with AARP, I'm delighted to welcome you to a virtual event that's close to our hearts. Our mission at AARP is to enrich the quality of life for individuals as they age through proactive advocacy, impactful service, and the dissemination of valuable information that champions positive social change. In today's event, we're diving into the dynamic concept of disrupt aging. Disrupt aging is about celebrating the diversity of aging experiences through personal stories, images, and a variety of perspectives, fostering a community that is not defined by a single voice, but is inclusive of the many voices advocating for change. Together, we'll challenge outdated beliefs about aging and to ignite new solutions for a future where every individual can age with dignity, purpose, and endless possibilities. Let's engage, learn, and be inspired to view aging through a new lens. Welcome to this journey of discovery and transformation. We also invite you to join the AARP volunteer team to make a difference in the caregiving community.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to AARP Illinois special virtual event featuring a true living legend from Springfield, Illinois, the Honorable U.S. Attorney Gregory K. Harris. I'm your host, Teresa Jones, Associate State Director of Advocacy and Outreach with AARP Illinois. We are thrilled to have U.S. Attorney Greg Harris here with us today. But before we dive into our conversation and our discussion, let's get to know a little bit more about our remarkable guest. Well, Mr. Harris is the first African American to serve as the U.S. Attorney for the Central District of Illinois. In March of 2022, United States Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed Mr. Harris out of 93 United States attorneys to serve on the Attorney General's Advisory Committee as one of the 13 states' attorneys to advise him on policy affecting the U.S. states' attorneys community. Mr. Harris is a tennis enthusiast. He also helped establish the Springfield Tennis Academy, and that was to introduce tennis to children and to kids who would not normally be exposed to the game. Mr. Harris and his wife, Hirut, have 3 children, Maya, who's 22, Leah's 21, and Fanuel Ace, who passed away in June of 2023. Mr. Harris attends Fresh Visions Church and was formerly a member of the First United Methodist Church and Grace United Methodist Church. Mr. Harris was confirmed by the U.S. Senate in December of 2021. U.S. Attorney Harris, a veteran attorney in Central Illinois, served as an assistant U.S. attorney for the Central District of Illinois for more than 30 years. He's a Howard University and University of Illinois Chicago Law School graduate. His experience also has included serving as legal counsel for the Illinois Governor's Office of Manpower and Human Development, attorney for the Illinois Department of Commerce and Community Development, and chief of the U.S. Attorney's Office Criminal Division. Now, let's get into our discussion, Mr. Harris. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us today.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Okay, well, now here we go. I shared just a little bit, although it seemed like a lot, but just a little bit about you in my introduction. Can you share more with our audience about what inspired you to become an attorney, how your career started, and your path from there?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, I think my first thought about becoming a lawyer occurred when my mother asked me what I wanted to do with my career, with what I wanted to do with my life. And she asked that, of course, to my other brothers as well. And she said, listen, I want you to be a professional, a doctor or a lawyer. And I thought, well, I don't like the sight of blood, so maybe the lawyer is a better course. And so that got me thinking about becoming a lawyer. My whole exposure at that time was the TV show Perry Mason, and that's all I knew about.
Yeah.
That's all I knew about really lawyers. My father was an Army officer, my mother a school teacher. So I didn't have any role models close at home, family members to look at. But that was what I knew about lawyers. And I was very fortunate that when I was in high school, I had a civics instructor who was a Harvard law grad, and he was, instead of practicing law, he was teaching in a public school system. And I thought he was fabulous. He communicated well. He connected with the students. I loved the subject matter. So that again encouraged me to think about a legal career. And then after college, after I attended Howard University, I planned on going to law school. So I had applied to a number of schools in the Washington, D.C. area. And I didn't get an acceptance at any of the schools that I really wanted to go to. So I thought I would work for a year or two before applying again and going to law school. Well, one of my neighbors, who is a judge in the Superior Court in Washington, D.C., said he knew that I wanted to go to law school and that I was going to take, a summer off. And he invited me to come down to the courthouse and see what lawyers do. So I thought that was a good idea. So he said, but understand this, I'll get you the job there, but you're going to start at the very bottom. And what he meant was that I got hired as a bailiff to open the courtroom for the judges. And so my legal career started as a bailiff, opening the court for judges. And I'd start off with the statement of I'd walk in before the judges would be robed, they'd be behind in their chambers. I would be the first one to come out in the courtroom and say, all rise, this honorable court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Johnson presiding. Please be seated and come to order. And that's how I started off my career. I eventually got promoted and became a courtroom clerk, accepting the files in the courtroom. But what that did for me was it was a real benefit, because I didn't realize this at the time, but because the District of Columbia is not a state, it's the district, it's a federal enclave, they don't have what we typically know as state's attorneys because it's not a state. So instead, their prosecutors in their criminal courts were federal prosecutors, assistant United States attorneys. And so I got to sit back as a bailiff and then later as a clerk and watch these young lawyers ply their trade. And they were amazing. They were impressive. So I knew even before I went to law school that one day I wanted to be an assistant United States attorney. Never ever realizing or thinking that I would one day become the head of the United States Attorney's Office in the Central District of Illinois.
That's pretty cool. I'm telling, and I think it's always good sometimes when people start at the bottom and then they know what everybody is experiencing, and how all of the jobs connect to one, to connect to each other. So, with that, can you tell our listening audience what exactly does it mean to be the top federal prosecutor for the Central District of Illinois?
Sure. So we, United States attorneys, are in charge of an office called the United States Attorney's Office. Here in the Central District, we have an office that has roughly about 73 employees. We're broken up into several divisions: the criminal division, the civil division, the appellate division, and the administrative office. So our district, or our territory where we have jurisdiction, involves Central Illinois. There are 3 federal districts in the state of Illinois: the Northern District, Chicago is the headquarters there; the Central District, Springfield, where I work, is the headquarters for that district; and the Southern District, Fairview Heights, is the headquarters for the Southern District. So those districts is headed up by a U.S. attorney. Our district, the Central District of Illinois, is the largest district in the state geographically. I mean, of course, the Northern District with Chicago is the largest population-wise. Mm-hmm. But that is a large district for us to oversee. So what we've done to manage our work in the district is to have 3 other offices outside of the headquarters office in Springfield to manage part of the district. So each one of those offices is assigned a certain number of counties. So we have an office, as I said, in Springfield, which is the headquarters office. Okay. But we also have offices in Peoria, Urbana, and Rock Island, Illinois.
Okay.
And so essentially what the U.S. Attorney's Office does is we represent the United States in federal court. So we represent the United States in everything that occurs in the United States District Court. Not only criminal cases, which we bring, but we also represent the United States in civil cases. So for example, if a post office truck was involved in an automobile accident and the driver sued the driver, the United States would step in place of the driver and be the party, the defendant in that lawsuit. And our lawyers would actually represent the United States in court.
Okay. Well, I never knew any of that. All right. So how has your journey influenced your approach to creating positive change? And has this impacted the communities that you serve?
Well, I think I go back to when I think of starting a career and working in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I have to go back to my parents and to how they inspired me to be public servants. They were both public servants. My mother in a public school system, my father as an Army officer. Growing up in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, also had a great deal of influence in terms of my aspiration to serve the country and the government. I thought about a career in private practice. I was a partner in a law firm, actually the first African-American partner of a major law firm in Springfield. I did that for 13 years. I enjoyed that. I enjoy representing individuals, but my heart is representing the government, representing the United States. And so, I grew up with that passion, and that greatly influenced, I think, my career. While most of my jobs were public service jobs, and as mentioned, I did spend almost a decade and a half in the private sector. I think my early experience from my parents forward directed me in the direction of being a public servant, which I very much enjoyed being.
So we talked about it a little bit, some of the geographical areas that you cover and support. So do you see a vast difference between those regions and communities?
Well, our district, as I mentioned, is the largest district in the state, and we are comprised of 46 counties. Most of the area that we serve is a rural areas, but we have 500 Fortune companies, Caterpillar, John Deere, ADM, and not Blue Cross Blue Shield, but in Bloomington,
State Farm.
State Farm. Thank you. So we have those five Fortune companies. We have about 2.7 million people that live within the district, and we have major urban areas within the district, like Springfield, Urbana, Peoria, Champaign. So there's a mix of people that live in the district, and they all have different concerns and needs. For example, in our more urban areas, what we've experienced is sort of gang activity that you don't see in rural areas. The proliferation of firearms is something, unfortunately, that emanated, I think, from urban areas, but has now spilled over into rural areas as well. So we're seeing more and more gun violence in rural areas than in years past. So yes, the character of the district is mostly rural, but it still has the urban features, so that we have crimes that are of all variety. In the rural areas, for example, years ago, we had a really bad string of farm fraud cases because of the lowering of farm prices. And so farmers depend on the fair value of their land when they go to the bank to seek a loan. And then when they get those loans, if the market drops, it's more difficult to pay back those loans. So some individuals have resorted to submitting false statements to the bank, selling the collateral that they had, which is typically the grains. We have those types of cases, but we also have, in the urban areas, we have drugs and guns are primarily offenses that we are actively involved in investigating and prosecuting.
Throughout your professional career, you've had a significant number of honors and awards, from the Illinois State Police, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the United States Secret Service, the Internal Revenue Service, and the United States Department of Justice. And that's just to name a few. So what accomplishments that I mentioned, or maybe that I didn't mention, are you most proud of?
Well, thank you for mentioning some of those honors. You hang around long enough, you're going to get a few awards.
I'm sure they were well deserved.
I was honored to receive any of those awards that you mentioned from any of those organizations. It's always flattering and inspiring to be rewarded by the folks that you work with, and it's something that I really feel honored to have received some of those awards. But I think of all of the awards in the organizations and the different groups that I've participated in a professional manner, I think working for the Attorney General's Advisory Committee was my most awe-inspiring opportunity to be around people that were so smart and so professional and so dedicated in what they were doing in the mission for the Department of Justice. So as an example, as you mentioned earlier, there were, out of 93 United States attorneys, this committee is consistent of 13 U.S. attorneys that are appointed by the Attorney General Merrick Garland. And I was very fortunate to have been selected as one of those 13 in the first group that were selected. We do, after some period of time, rotate off the committee. So I rotated off a couple of months ago, but spent almost 2 years on that committee, and it was one of the most amazing experiences I've had in my life. The committee was headed up by an individual named Damian Williams, who was the chairman of the committee. He's the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York.
Okay.
Very personable, very bright. To give you a idea of his professional background, he was a Harvard Law graduate, Yale undergrad, clerk for Merrick Garland when he was an appellate court justice, and then clerk for a United States Associate Supreme Court judge. Very outstanding person. But when he would come into our room and preside over our meetings, it was like you were talking to your brother, or your sister, or your friend, or your colleague. And he made the whole experience in the room such a easy place to talk about issues. It's like folks would walk in and check their egos at the door, and walk in, and we became fast friends. And the 13 U.S. attorneys of that group, 7 of the 13 were African Americans, were Black. So
Wow.
that was a phenomenal event.
Yeah.
It never happened in the history of the Department of Justice, which, by the way, I might mention, the department was created to address civil rights issues. And most people don't realize that, but there wasn't a Department of Justice until the Ku Klux Klan started their activities in the South, and the department was created to address that kind of violence.
Oh my goodness. I did not know that. Yeah.
So there's that connection with civil rights. And so working with these professionals, these U.S. attorneys from around the country, was awe-inspiring. And I think, to answer your question, that was probably the most significant event that I've had in my career as a U.S. attorney.
I can see why, and especially with the history around it.
Yes.
So, reflecting on your experiences of working on both sides of the justice system, what changes have you seen, and what challenges have you witnessed?
Well, I've worked in the public sector, the private sector. I've worked on criminal cases. I've worked on the civil side as well. I've worked as a public defender, not only as a prosecutor. So I really have had a well-balanced career. While I think, my heart's always been on the prosecution side, because I think we have a lot of resources. And one of the reasons that I wanted to be a prosecutor rather than continue my career as a defense attorney is because we get to make the decisions on who to prosecute. And I felt like historically, Black people really weren't involved in that process. We were involved in the process. We came into the criminal justice system after being charged with a crime, and we would have lawyers who would come and defend us, but it was always reactionary, which is fine. We need good defense lawyers to represent folks, but I wanted to be in a position where I actually made the decision on who to charge with offenses. And so that's why I've sort of leaned toward the prosecution side. But both roles are invaluable and are needed and are required under our Constitution and to protect people's rights. They're both need to be active, involved, and I think overall that we have a very good judicial system in our setup. I guess changes that I've seen over the years. Well, there are less and less lawyers now that are coming out of law schools, and the availability of lawyers, particularly in rural areas, has declined significantly. women have increased now in terms of their availability and their participation in the bar associations and in becoming lawyers. And I think that's a very, very good thing. And you have a number of lawyers at the other end of the spectrum who had been practicing law for maybe 30, 40 years who are now leaving the profession. So the profession is shrinking because of fewer numbers coming in and more folks retiring. And so that poses a significant problem for law firms, for agencies like mine. I've experienced difficulty in terms of hiring because the pool has shrunk significantly. Give you an example. When I started in the U.S. Attorney's Office a long time ago as an assistant United States attorney in 1980, because I was the only Black lawyer in the office, one of the only Black employees in the office, I got picked to be on the selection and the hiring committee to add the diversity to that committee. So I've been involved in the hiring practice for over 30 years. But at that time, there were very few openings in the U.S. Attorney's Office for prosecutor positions. Very, very few. I'm talking nationally. And in our district itself, most lawyers, when you were hired, stayed for 10, 20 years. It's a good job. So when there was an opening that occurred, we would have upwards of 100 people, Ivy League schools, HBCUs, state schools, private schools. The variety was enormous, and we could pick and choose. The hardest part of the selection process was getting a list of just 10 to interview. Today, we have openings all around the country for federal positions, prosecutor positions. In our district, we'll have an opening come up and we'll maybe have 30 applicants.
Wow.
So, and the quality and variety of the applications, of course, vary. Now, I think we have been very fortunate that we'll still have one or two as the cream of the crop that we would have selected from that list of 100 anyway. They're still applying, but it's nerve-wracking when you think about the selection is very
limited,
very limited, and that if it keeps going in that direction, we're going to get to a point where it's going to be really hard to fill positions. So those are some of the changes that I've, and it's, by the way, it's not just government positions. I've talked to partners in law firms, and they're experiencing the same decline in the number of applicants that they're getting. So it's getting tougher to hire, and in some respects, it's getting harder to retain people after they're hired for a period of time. Back in the day when I started, it was like I think this is just generally in our business community. When you took a job, you intended to stay at that job for 20, 30 years and retire with a gold watch, right? And that your whole focus is going to be on that company or agency. Today, it's people take a job to get a few years of experience to use that to springboard to another job, and then to springboard to another. So the dynamics have changed considerably. So
tremendously. Yeah, they have. Because I remember we started jobs and you stayed there forever. You retired from there. And then you noticed a trend. As I got older, I noticed this trend coming that, you go 2-3 years and then you're moving around. And so every 3 or 4 years, somebody's changing the job. And as you said, they're using their first job as a springboard and the second job as a springboard. So now I'm going to ask you a question that we hadn't talked about, but why do you think the numbers are diminishing for people to become attorneys or whatever? And do you see a trend, like, is it with people of color, or is it just overall?
I think it's just overall, Teresa. I don't think it's just directed to persons of color. It's always been a concern with people of color joining this very conservative profession. We have not had real high numbers in the profession. And so when the whole thing starts shrinking, it also decreases the number of Black professionals who are attorneys. And so it makes it even worse than it was before as far as our representation in the legal community. But I think that some of it has to do with the high cost of education, that you come out with so much debt to begin with, and then to go on to professional school and acquire more debt is folks are looking for alternative ways of having a career. I think that's had a negative impact on the profession. And another part that is kind of head scratching to me, but we know it exists, is that the work-life balance has changed over the years. People do not think about working 10, 12 hours a day. They want to make sure that they have time for their family and raising children and taking vacations. And it seems like there's been a little bit of a shift from priorities of focused about the work and then bringing the family and other interests around the work setting. So we notice that, and it's particularly difficult for trial lawyers who are at the beck and call of judges in the court system to be able to say, well, I'm going to telework today, right? I'm going to work from home. Well, you can't telework from home if you have to be in the courtroom.
Exactly.
And so while we're hiring folks, we notice that some people, I think, are a little bit discouraged about the fact that this is not, if you're a trial lawyer, this is not a career or a practice that you can telework as much as others in other different professions. And we do teleworking here, and our support staff, depending on their position, can telework. Most of our staff, support staff, telework twice a week, are allowed to work from home twice a week. And but essentially our professional staff is 9 to 9, at least 9 to 5, Monday through Friday.
So in your role as being the first Black U.S. attorney, what advice do you have for individuals seeking success in this field? And let's say particularly with young African Americans.
Well, I think it's, again, I have to go back to what my parents taught us as we were growing up about working hard and trying to, you can't just look at others and how much time they put in. You have to put in more time. You have to work harder. You can't do everything that everybody else is doing. People are looking at you critically. They may not come out with a view, may not start off with a view that you're competent or qualified or that you have the real faculties to do the job well. So you have to realize that when you're working. So your product has to be a superior product all the time. In my profession, your word is your bond. I mean, you're appearing before judges. You cannot be shading comments and that kind of stuff. So you've got to be pretty much a straight arrow. You've got to recognize that there's some folks, and I'm talking about Black people in general, specifically, you've got to realize that there's some people that just don't think that you should be where you are. So you have to be, you have to be confident in yourself. You have to make sure that you don't feel like mediocrity is acceptable because you see it around you because some other folks are. No, you've always got to be strive to be the best in what you're doing. Those are qualities I think that I would say I would encourage everybody to have, but specifically for African Americans to understand that in this field, we haven't been lawyers for that many years, and it's so it means that you're not going to have as many judges that are mentors and other lawyers that are going to be mentors, and so you're going to be lonely a little bit,
Yeah.
and what you're doing. But I think having confidence in yourself, confidence that you should be where you are, and you in the past have not been there, not because we as a race or as a group have lacked the competency, but for other various reasons. And you can't use that as a guiding light when you come into a new work area. You have to realize that you are as qualified, if not more so, and respond that way. Take on some leadership roles. Not be afraid of your own voice, speaking up. And a lot of times, I found myself in my career that I was the only African American in the room, and it seemed as if my advice or my comments were not being taken seriously. Well, you can't let that discourage you, and you can't say, "Well, I'm not going to stay anything anymore. I'm not going to participate anymore." You have to participate anyway, and continue to work at that. And I think if you were to look for one word to define my career over time, it would be perseverance. Perseverance would be the word, because there were many times when I thought this was not really going in the right direction. That when I got the desire and the interest to become the U.S. attorney after 8 years working as an assistant United States attorney, I looked and I thought, well, I could be U.S. attorney. I have the same qualities as this U.S. attorney, and there's no reason why I shouldn't be. There hasn't been any ever in the past, but I could be the first. I'm qualified and I have all the credentials and so forth. And it took me 3 applications before I was finally selected. I mean, I applied when Bill Clinton was president. I applied when Barack Obama was president, and someone else got the position. And so I could have said, it's not for me. It's just not in the cards. But I applied again when President Biden was elected. And I thought, this is probably going to be the last time, due to my age, that I'm going to apply for this position. And boom, the door opened. So I guess my advice is keep pushing on that door, and eventually that door is going to open. And if you have the qualifications that are necessary for that next step, then when that crack opens and that door jumps,
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Sure, go through that door and take advantage of that opportunity.
Now, I know you to be a great man of faith. Excuse me. We go to the same church, so.
Yes.
So what role do you believe that spirituality and faith play in fostering resilience and unity within communities during times of adversity?
I think it plays a great role. It plays a great role in my life. I think of the 23rd Psalm all the time in terms of giving me the confidence and strength to fight adversity. And I think the community, we collectively do the same thing, that we're going to persevere no matter what the obstructions are that we're facing. So I really feel deeply about spirituality and faith, and that, I think, is the only way that we have in the past endured, and that we will continue to push forward in the future and endure.
Well, we're getting ready to run out of time here, but I have a couple more questions. This has been a great conversation. I'm going to have you back. So it's simple as that, so we can finish. But what are some of the criminal justice issues that you've addressed during your time in office? Are there other issues at the top of your list?
Well, the major focus right now is on drugs and crimes, as I mentioned earlier. And this illegal firearms epidemic that we have today is just horrendous. And it keeps me up at night. I wonder about why it is that we have something like 233 million people in the United States, and we have over 300 million guns in the United States. What are we arming ourselves for? What is the point of this? And I am very dismayed when I see so many Black young men that are involved in firearm violence. And for our district, as I mentioned, we have 46 counties. I get news from media reports every day from all of those areas about shootings and crimes of violence that occur. And it's staggering, Teresa, the number of Black people that are involved in not only being the shooter, but being the victim of shooting. And it's something that we have to address. We have to deal with. When we talk about the drug trade, almost everybody that we see, and we see the worst of the worst in federal court. If they're a drug dealer, there's a gun involved. You stop a car because of some traffic violation, and you see a gun's involved. You search the vehicle, and you're going to find drugs. Drugs and guns go hand in hand. So first of all, we should not be involved in illegal drug activity. First of all, selling poison in the community. That's number one. And then having a firearm, this lethal weapon to protect your business, is another danger that you're exposing the public to. So, we have other problems with fentanyl and the, overdose deaths and all those things. We have white collar crime. Unfortunately, we're seeing more and more child exploitation cases that we're getting involved in. And that's just on the domestic scene. Our office also is involved in foreign intelligence and foreign crimes that are committed, like human trafficking, that it affects international trade as well as domestically. We are also concerned about a number of white supremacist organizations that seem to be ramping up and getting more involved in crime and threatening folks and intimidating people. We're looking more at intimidation toward election workers. So there's just a broad array of crimes and offenses that the Justice Department is involved in prosecuting, and that we are involved in the Central District of investigating and prosecuting as well. But I would say that probably the number one crime issue that I look at and I'm addressing and trying to protect the public is illegal firearm violence.
So I'm going to give you a couple minutes here as we wrap up. So as we wrap up this conversation, what message would you like to share with our audience?
Well, again, this has been the honor of my career to serve as your United States Attorney for the Central District. I'll do everything that I possibly can to follow through and carry out the message and the dictates and the goals of the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who, as you may know from newspaper clippings and so forth, that when he meets with the AGAC, which is about monthly, we get to meet on a one-on-one basis. And I can tell you that I have really grown to admire the Attorney General as a person. He's very much concerned with protecting the public. His goals are three in number: basically uphold the rule of law, protect the public, and enforce civil rights. That's what he came in as a platform. That's what he's designed the Department of Justice to do. And I'm just so happy and pleased to be able to be a small part of doing that kind of work in the Central District of Illinois.
Well, and I'm honored to know you as well. So, but I want to thank you. I want to thank you. Our audience will thank you. The Honorable U.S. Attorney Greg Harris for sharing your insights and experiences. We appreciate your time and the valuable contributions that you continue to make to and for our communities and to Illinois. As I said earlier, I got to have you back so we can go farther along with this, because this has been a wonderful conversation. And to our audience, we'd like to thank you for joining us for this enlightening conversation. So remember, the power to create positive change lies within each of us. Let's continue the dialogue and work together for a more equitable and just future. Once again, thank you all for joining AARP Illinois today. We look forward to continuing our mission of supporting seniors, caregivers, and the entire aging community in Illinois. If you would like more information on AARP's upcoming virtual events, or if you are interested in volunteering with us, please visit aarp.org/Illinois. We'd like you to have a wonderful day, and this concludes today's virtual event. Thank you.